turn them off? There are two items from Speaker Jim Wing and Randy Craig that are not on the agenda. So, Randy, I look at yours first, so if you want to do something.
Do now.
Oh, we're missing Michael and Ronit and Alex. Well, Michael said he wasn't going to come, but the other two did not. Go ahead, Randy. Thanks.
I'm Randy Cree. I'm a member of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, and we typically send somebody to observe your meeting, and I'm the person doing that tonight. I've looked through the agenda. There's nothing that's been on our agendas from before, so there's no plan on my part to speak any further and just let you know I'm here. If you have anything you want me to take back to BPAC, I can do that. Otherwise, I'll just report on what I see tonight.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Let it be known that Ronit just showed up. Okay. Jim?
Let's see, I'm Jim Wing. My home of 49 years is on Milverton Road. I'm here tonight to ask you for a future agenda item to discuss the possibility of putting the Stalker radar speed card data on your website. And the handout I gave you there is just a couple of pages that of some information that is available there. Keep in mind that the City of Los Altos has 5 of these cards now. They not only do they measure and display the speed, they also count every car per unit time. So on our street, we're finding that they're about 70% effective in terms of reducing speed. They are widely used, and they have this good set of data. And of course, it's downloadable on a flash drive, and the police department has the software provided by Stalker to go ahead and give you a lot of different options in terms of display. On our street, what I found is that many of my neighbors really are not calibrated as to how fast cars are going. And they really sometimes in meetings they will emotionally talk about for a long time about the cars that are going 40 and 50 miles an hour on our street. But in reality, as the data shows, most of them are about 30 to 35 in that respect. So it makes the discussions amongst the neighbors more objective. Also, another key thing is that we do communicate with the police department as to when we would like to get some traffic, or mostly, in this case, speeding enforcement in our street. And having this data available to us enables us to communicate well, because we can tell them how many, what time, and what the speeds are. And it narrows their perspective as to when to come. This data here, at least what I've used with my neighbors, has been very effective. And having it readily available, I did get this data through request via Cedric, but it took about 6 months to get it. And the real problem with the police department, plus the staff, is no one has the resource budgeted to go ahead and bring this data to the website, to where it's available to the public. And so therefore, the prime reason for discussing it would be to make a recommendation to encourage staff to go ahead and budget for this type of work in the forthcoming year. Thank you very much.
I have a question, Mr. Wing.
Yes.
At the very beginning, when you spoke, you said that the radar card is 70% effective. I think I heard you say that. Is that on this chart here and I'm not reading it? I mean, what does that statistic come from?
Since this is public comment, I don't know how far to go there. I'm going to talk about that when we talk about the traffic speeds.
Okay.
If you want to hold that question,
I can
hold that
certainly
thought,
hold it.
ask me again, and I'll tell you exactly how that was obtained. Okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Planning and Transportation Commission minutes from meeting in November. Oh, Alex showed up. Okay. Welcome, Alex.
Yvonne said she was reading my black container. Does someone have it in front of them? I have the insert. I had some notes from last session. I left them.
What are you looking for?
My little black file folder.
Oh,
On the page you're leaving.
That one's mine.
that one's mine,
Okay.
no?
All right. It's okay, I printed everything out, but
Turn your machine on.
my notes.
Turn your mic on.
So any comments on the mission, or do I hear a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of November 17th.
I
I
second.
think I had one,
Okay.
sorry, I think I had one correction. I was absent at that meeting, but I'm being attributed to asking something for
Really?
potential future agenda items.
Yes, I think probably you didn't make that recommendation. So who did?
Good question.
David, you want to go back to the tape and see what you can find?
Or did you do it at a different meeting?
Different meeting.
No?
I remember the
Just not-
comment, but
Yeah, I-
maybe it wasn't that meeting. Was it?
Yeah, I feel like I've heard maybe you
Was it
did ask
different,
it,
Tom?
but different time.
Okay. I move that we approve the minutes of November 17th, subject to staff investigating the potential future agenda item, maker of the item.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. 6.
I'll abstain just because I wasn't here.
Okay.
Do we even need to call attention to public hearings 2 and 3, seeing
No.
as how they're date
They've been
uncertain?
continued.
So I don't see the point. So let's go to discussion item number 4, stop sign policy. Consideration of a stop sign policy in Los Altos. We have a presentation.
Good evening. My name is Cedric Novenaro, Transportation Services Manager for the city. And tonight, the first item I'll be discussing with you is a draft stop sign policy. The intent of me bringing this policy to your commission for consideration is to provide structure and some guidance to the public of how we would take in and process a stop sign request. In other agencies where I've worked at, there have been policies that have been created to guide staff as staff interchanges, goes back and forth, and other staff can follow, as well as give the policy to the public so they understand what criteria is used in evaluating stop signs. The other thing, too, is the city doesn't have a formal policy. The past practice has been to follow state standards that are issued by Department of Transportation, which is Caltrans. So my presentation will, give you a brief summary of the major principles of what we look for in developing stop signs, installing stop signs, some rules of the road as the California Handbook and the California Vehicle Code, and then I'll take you through 4 requests for stop signs that we've received recently. So these bullet points here are in the draft policy that you have as part of your report. So some of the things I just want to highlight. So stop signs are used to assign right-of-way at an intersection. That's pretty obvious. For us to install them, it's governed by the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So it's just my industry's go-to book in deciding these things. We often get requests to use stop signs for speed control, and we do not like using stop signs for speed control. It's primarily a tool to assign right-of-way. So if you put them in a place where they're not really needed, you get a car speeding up to the sign and speeding away from the sign, and therefore your speeding still exists. So this comes from the driver DMV rules, handbook rules of the road. So we have a lot of intersections where we don't have stop control. And I'll just read the bullet. So at intersections without stop or yield signs, we slow down and be ready to stop. Yield to traffic and pedestrians already in the intersection or just entering the intersection. Also to yield to vehicles or bikes that arrive first, or to the vehicle or bicycle to your right. So we all know that from our driver education and driver training. But in practice and in what Officer Brooks and I see, that doesn't happen all the time. So that tells me we need to assign the right-of-way to the road that needs it the most. And again, this is from Vehicle Code Section 21800, which is what Officer Brooks to cite people who entered the right-of-way illegally. So the driver approaching a vehicle approaching an intersection shall yield the right-of-way to any vehicle which is entered from a different highway. So in the next few slides, you'll see what I'm talking about. So here's Casita Alvarado. If you're familiar with that, this is a four-legged intersection, no stop signs. So when I head to Mountain View, I sometimes go through this way, and I see cars, even though there's a pretty big valley gutter, there's a dip, cars still turn it without ceding the right of way. So this is one intersection that we've gotten complaints for stop signs. We haven't studied this intersection, but just offhand, looking at the way the traffic patterns are going, we would probably stop Casita, which is where that valley gutter is, and making sure, and the other end is actually almost a dead end, so there's less traffic coming out. I would first look at stopping your least trafficked leg, and then let the majority movement go, so that way you know who has the right of way. Here's another one which is a little bit further away, just Alvarado and Distal. Here's another intersection, 4 legs, no stop sign. So the majority movement here is on Alvarado, which is up and through the picture there, because Distal is the cross street. Distal actually feeds the high school also, so you get a lot of school traffic there. But Alvarado gets both high school traffic and the middle school traffic, which Alvarado also acts as a cut-through sometimes when El Camino is backed up. So there's a lot of traffic going on Alvarado as compared to Distal. This one we get quite a few complaints about Holly and Mackenzie, which is the central part of the town. It's a very all legs are wide. Motorists, especially during the time of the Fremont Bridge construction, would use this as to get around the construction, and motorists were traveling at high rate of speed down the street. Mackenzie actually acts as one of the parks in Los Altos, so there's a lot of cross traffic coming through there. And then Oak and Ravenswood, this is near Mountain View High School and Oak Elementary. The traffic pattern here is on Ravenswood, motorists would make a left turn without stopping at the T. So generally, at T intersections, you stop the T, which would be Ravenswood in this section. So the policy provides residents who want stop signs what we look for, so they can better inform themselves. Should I ask for a stop sign? Is there enough traffic here? Should the vehicles be stopping where they should be stopping per the vehicle code? Do they not know that? So when they feed this information to me, I can make a better judgment on how I should apply the rules of the road, as well as letting them know whether a stop sign could be enforceable or not. So my next steps would be I would go to the BPAC meeting next week to give a similar presentation. Based on their comments from both commissions, I would develop a worksheet that would take into account, school traffic, bicycle traffic? Is it feeding a school nearby? How much traffic is going through there? Is it a minor lake versus a major lake? Are there other treatments like red zones that can provide sight distance so that when a car enters the intersection, there's enough sight distance for them to make a decision to enter the intersection safely? Once I develop that, then I'll present it to City Council for their approval. That's my presentation.
I have a question if anybody else doesn't.
I have two, so we could work our way down the list.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question, looking at the report here, it says the draft policy is based on a successful policy from the city of San Mateo. So I wondered what the definition of success was, what the measurement was to deem that successful.
So our director, Public Works, Susanna Chan, was the former city engineer at City of San Mateo, and she was, to me, suggested this policy as a good measuring stick. And I read through this, and it's very similar to what other policies I've used in other cities I've worked at. What made it successful was the interaction between. It had an appeal process. So lots of times residents don't want a stop sign by their homes because of pollution or whatever reasons they have. The appeal process further educated to the resident who made the appeal why it was needed. And that way that information was clear, it was transparent, and the process was just successful in itself. But as far as the standards, they're pretty much across the board similar in every agency.
Okay. And then a similar question, but it sounded like, so we're absent a policy, but what you've been doing and following internally isn't going to change that much. It's still the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, et cetera, et cetera. But it looks like with the policy, then you'd have some guidelines in place that is more to help the public understand. It's not so much going to change what you do, but the public's ability to participate in that process. Is that correct?
Yes, and there are some things that the standards don't specifically call out, which I do, like visibility, minor leg versus four-legged intersections is a consideration. So
it goes beyond.
Yeah.
It gives further explanation. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I do. So I understood the concept of minor leg for the less active versus more active intersection, but I was concerned because what I like about Los Altos is that our stop signs usually are four-way, or if it's a T, then it's obvious where the stop is. I have some concern about two-way stop signs because I noticed that in Palo Alto, you have to have a second sign that says cross traffic doesn't stop.
Underneath.
Yeah. And I find that a little potentially dangerous. And I didn't see any mention of two-way in the report, which I thought was a really good report. Thank you, Cedric. Made it clear what was going on. How do you integrate that, or is that not one of your standard weapons? So
is the question...
do we have two-way stop sign intersection in a four-way? Do we have only two signs at a four-way intersection in Los Altos? Is that part of our policy?
So, for example, if I go back to one of these roads, like
Yeah.
Holly McKenzie, there's no
There's
control,
nothing at all here.
no control there. I would first look at the least restrictive solution. So it would be a two-way in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But if our analysis bore out that we need four, then we would put four. So I would
If
always
it
go...
was two, would it have the secondary sign that
It
says
would.
cross-traffic doesn't?
Yeah,
Okay.
it would. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
My only question is, I'm just curious about, did we select these particular streets because of more public complaint, neighborhood complaint, or increased number of accidents, or both?
Well, these four I selected because of complaints that we've received, and just thought they were good examples of how we can use a policy to analyze these intersections. But as part of our analysis, you look at accidents, and if the stop sign can correct those accidents.
And I'm also curious, is, if I read my packet right, this may or may not be an item that the planning commission even needs to look at. I mean, it could go directly to council for a vote as opposed to being scrutinized by the planning commission. Am I right? Did I read that right?
Well, I think in my report I suggested if the commission want to be as part of the appeal process, and as part of that. So if I make a determination that there should be a stop sign, the resident adjacent says, I don't want it there, they follow the appeal process. I cited the public works director as part of the appeal process, but I requested if the PTC would like to be part of the appeal process as well, or in lieu of the director.
So that's one of our decision points.
That's one of our decisions. So does it go from us to city council, or?
Well, I'd have to work that out now then, if that's what you want as a commission to be part of.
Because it's a first for me.
Yeah.
How many years? Okay, I'm just curious. All right, thank you.
I don't have. So,
Ronit?
I like that we put in a process because it sounds like residents would come, they'd have a desire, and maybe since there was no formal process, it wasn't clear for them, or it wasn't transparent, or maybe there wasn't consistency, they'd get an answer. And so I like the fact that we're putting this into place. The only question I have is whether the numbers and, like the number of vehicles and the number of units that we put in here is right for Los Altos. And I wonder if there's a way that we could, if we implement this, revisit in a year and see, okay, how many applications were actually brought forward, and then how many resulted in stop signs. And if it turned out that, I don't know how it will work out, but let's say 90% didn't result in stop signs, then maybe we have to consider whether these numbers really fit our town. Like, I didn't understand. Are the numbers that you pulled are probably from an example of a neighboring town,
No.
right? Or was San Mateo, you said?
Oh, this policy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you got into the nitty gritty of where you talk about, how many vehicles per hour have to pass, I feel like San Mateo and Los Altos are quite different in terms of maybe volume. So,
Well, actually, the numbers of vehicles, that comes from the state standards.
okay, so that's
That's the state.
the state will say if you don't have this number, you can't get a stop sign.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not even subjective; it's totally an objective standard.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that,
Also, if
how are we
if don't
going
meet-
to measure the results?
well, I'm wondering if
in a
we're
year?
fixing.
To tell you the truth,
Problem.
300 vehicles per hour. Let's see. I mean, that's probably easy to achieve on your collector streets like Covington, El Monte, Grant. Where you might have a problem with like a street like Holly and Mackenzie, then I'd have to check if other agencies have scaled down these numbers. But I believe if we do that, we have to write to the state asking them for permission to do that.
Got it. No, if it's an objective standard, then I'm okay with it. But what I'm suggesting is that people are probably bringing this in areas where they seem to have a concern and where there is probably a higher degree of issues coming up
Yeah.
on a daily basis. So if they don't meet the standard for a stop sign, that may not be we may not want to just sort of end the discussion.
No, and I
What to
think
do
what
there.
I think the law gives us flexibility for engineering judgment based on our knowledge of the area. So, for example, this intersection, I know the left turn on Ravenswood on the Oak is happening during the school time, and they're not yielding to the Oak movement.
Right.
So, based on my engineering judgment, that's a broadside hit. So I can maybe, at that point, I may have to go to council and say, I am suggesting a stop sign here. It doesn't follow some of our criteria, but based on my engineering judgment, we should put this here. So, that could also
it.
be done as well.
So what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I don't have an objection to this policy. It seems like the right thing to do. what, do you foresee that we're going to get a bunch of stop signs in these areas that people have a desire to see them?
Like, for example, I think I'll be proposing a stop sign on Ravenswood for sure. On Holly Mackenzie, I'll at least look at two-way stop signs, but I'm not sure which lake would be the one receiving that. Distal, Alvarado, I'll be at least looking at two-way stop signs on Distal. And then Casita, Alvarado, I'm thinking at least Casita, but I'll have to see how the volumes kind of bear out. But I'm at
How would
least
this
looking at two-way
policy
stop signs.
change what you're doing now?
Right.
Has it changed? Well, in essence, it doesn't change that much, but at least the public has this tool to see how it gets developed. And for me, that's also a strong case to go to council if there's a question. This is policy here that requires me to look at A, B, C, D. I looked at all of them, and it satisfies all or two or three. And based on my engineering judgment, I think we should put this in.
But at the same time, if someone objects, they have a method
process.
for-
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Good.
this is all policies or state mandated criteria, right?
Yeah.
So you could easily just say, here's a website where the state lists
Here's the criteria.
what the criteria are,
Yeah,
right? Or
You
is
could,
something,
but I also think
are there differences or nuances that we're not picking up that are different from state criteria?
Well, I mean, the state doesn't have the appeal process like this one does. I'm adding the line of sight criteria as well as one of those.
So this is an enhanced version.
Yeah, and I think this gives good transparency to how we put these devices in.
Sure. And are those the only two changes from state?
Appeal and visibility?
Visibility. I mean, those are the specific ones that I know of. These other ones are kind of like the state has like a catch-all phrase. So at least I'm specifically pointing out high pedestrian generators, minor leg versus minor legs of 3 or 4-legged intersections. So these are a little bit above what the state would be asking us to do.
Can I ask one follow-up question? So this might actually tie into one of the comments we had on items not on the agenda, but when the initial request, if it's initiated by the public, they don't have any data to know where their application, unless they go sit out they take a chair and go sit at the corner and start counting. So when do you actually get the data to determine whether something does or doesn't fit the criteria?
So we would be the ones doing the data collection. For volume counts, we would put the rubber tubes out there, or we do physical counts when we're present. You would have to do physical counts to count the pedestrians. You would take line of sight measurements with our engineering tools. So we'll be out there collecting all the data.
So data collection is triggered by a request that isn't based on data, based on gut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just ask one more clarifying question? So today, if someone came and requested a stop sign and you just knew that it wasn't going to meet the criteria, could you just essentially ignore the request?
Today, I wouldn't. Well, how do you define ignore?
Just say like it's not going to, like there's no reason to go do data collection or spend time and resources on.
Well, we would at least the things I look at initially are the sight distance. If I don't have sight distance, more likely than not, I will probably get the stop sign. I'll look at the sight distance first, and I'll see if it's available. Then if it's not available, then I'll explore it even further regarding data collection, because we have to schedule our crews to put it out there, and then we have to process the information. But I wouldn't ignore it in the sense that I won't go do anything about it, but at least I'll check a few things that I can check on Google Earth and those things.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Ignore was the wrong terminology.
We don't
But
ignore our
yeah,
citizens.
I guess the question would be, by having this policy in place, does that then force your hand to expend more resources on going down a road that you know at the end of the day is kind of a waste of resources? Or does that not change because you have to get to data collection? You're not forcing your hand.
I don't think it forces my hand that much. I'll do some initial investigation anyway, And, what's another week with just data collection? The tubes set out there on their own. I'm not sitting with it. Yeah.
I want to know, do we have that stop sign really, you got to stop in town?
I wish we did. It might work.
Okay, Cedric, I think you're doing also item number 5 as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there a motion?
Okay.
Or?
Did you have any speakers on?
We need to
number
move.
4?
No,
We need to
just for
make a
5,
motion.
none for 4, no. No speakers.
So the action on this item, John, is recommend approval of the stop sign policy to the city council. So discussion
correct.
point is, do we want, and the last paragraph on our first page of the report says, we may elect to consider being part of the appeal process prior to city council. Is there a
That's what I was getting to. and I was-
consensus as to whether, as a commission, we would like to be part of the appeal process or not?
Is that an action item that we should do today, David?
Yes.
They would have a 2-part appeal, so it's.
First us, then city council.
And then
they
city
have to
council.
successfully get through both, presumably?
As a straw poll, I would not think it would be valuable for us to do this because it goes to city council anyway. Does anybody, all right.
I agree.
So if that's the case and there's no other comments, I move we recommend approval of the stop sign policy to city council without PTC being part of the appeal process prior to city council consideration.
Comments? Second?
I was going to make one comment was I did think that, do you want to consider adding the language of two stop signs on a 4-leg or even 3-leg? Phoebe's point from earlier.
Well, actually, Cedric made me feel, he said if they do a 2 sign at a 4-legged intersection, it would have the thing that says cross-traffic does not stop.
Okay.
The additional sign underneath.
Right, okay, so you don't feel that you need explicit
No.
wording addressing that, okay. I
Do I hear a
withdraw my
second?
comment then.
You going to second that then?
I'll second then.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, item number 5, thank you.
So that's
Congrats.
6-0 with McTighe absent.
All right, so this is the fun one. So I have Acting Sergeant Eric Brooks here. He's our traffic enforcement officer. We often talk time to time on traffic issues in the city, so we're good friends. So, I'm aware that the topic of speed limits can be a difficult subject to talk about, but bound from my profession, I'm required to review engineering and traffic surveys, where essentially are speed surveys, every few years, and I'm bound by the rules and regulations by the state when I do these surveys. So this is a presentation that I gave to City Council. Oh, actually, let me change this. This is a presentation I gave to City Council back in 2013. So it details the codes we abide by and our rounding rules when we collect data. So the applicable codes that we follow, myself and Acting Sergeant Brooks, are of course, the California Vehicle Code, and those are the various sections that we both follow, and the California METCD, which is our Bible in terms of how we set the speed limits, and it requires us to reevaluate the speed limits every 5, 7, and 10 years. So in 2007, there were 18 valid surveys adopted, and then there were 23 segments which were elected to keep the posted speed limits on the streets. So as you see, as they are now. However, when you do that, when you don't have a valid survey, they become unenforceable by radar gun or by the laser LiDAR. In 2013, we recertified 19 of them. However, there were 23 segments that were still decided to be kept the way they are.
Why are they unenforceable by radar?
Officer Brooks will get to that a little bit later.
Okay, all right.
And so earlier in 2016, we were able to get 26 surveys recertified, which matched the existing speed limits. So for us, that's a good thing for us. That way, these guys can do their enforcement in the safest manner without having to pace. So I believe this is similar to what's in your packet there. So when the speed limit is to be posted, it shall be established at the nearest 5 mile per hour increment of the 85th percentile free flow traffic, and we'll talk about that number a little bit later. So we have two options when we do the rounding. I can reduce it by 5 from the nearest 5 mile per hour increment of the 85th percentile speed based on those two codes. For cases in which the nearest 5 mile per hour increment of the 85th percentile speed would require rounding up, I can still round it down. So I'll have two scenarios in this next slide. So scenario 1, if I collect data and my data shows 85% of the speed is going at 33 miles per hour, step 1, I round to the nearest 5. So that would be 35. Then I can round down an additional 5 to 30, but I would need justification. Is there a school nearby? Are there a lot of cyclists, a lot of walkers? Are there no sidewalks for people to walk on? So those sorts of things I'd have to cite in my engineering traffic survey. Scenario 2, if I get an 85th percentile speed of 32, my nearest rounding to 5 is 30, and I could bring it down another 5 with the same kind of justification. So first step, round to the nearest 5, then I can back off 5. I can't go any further than that by the state law. So again, justifications to round down, accident history, bike and pedestrian activity, am I close to a school, are there driveway after driveway after driveway along the street, and other conditions that are not readily apparent to the driver, which Officer Brooks can give you some examples of. So enforcement, I'm just going to read the slide, but Officer Brooks is better equipped to handle this topic. So if we don't have an engineering traffic survey, we can't do radar. Then they have to do a pace method, which is you're following the car at that speed. And that's generally used for the freeways or bigger highways. It's not conducive to our streets in Los Altos. So the safest method really is by radar. And for them to legally do this, the engineering traffic survey has to be approved by the governing body of the agency, so the city council. If there's no current survey, it can be thrown out in court. So basically, it's not going to stand. You go to traffic court. So that results in what we're experiencing now is non-compliance with the speed. Regardless if it's posted 30, they may be going at 37, and we can't ticket because we don't have the survey. And then we have complaints, and I can't do anything about it. Neither can Officer Brooks, unfortunately. If he does enforcement, it becomes a speed trap, and it violates the law. So this is the second half of the survey for the rest of the city. This table is part of your packet as well. These are the recommended speed limits. So in general, aside from Miramonte Avenue between Foothill and Portland, they're going up from 25 to 30 miles per hour. In the second and third columns, I showed you what the 85th percentile speeds from 2013 when we last did it to 2016, and you can see they, didn't change that much. So what that tells us is the motorists have found the speed, regardless of what's posted out there. And then this is also part of your packet. This is the black corridors are what we previously got approved by the city council, and the green and yellow are what's being proposed in this go around. And do you have any other comments?
Yeah, you want to go ahead and throw it back to the other slide there?
This one?
Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I'm Acting Sergeant Eric Brooks with the Los Altos Police Department. I'm in charge of the traffic division right now. I've actually been in the traffic division twice. This is my second run at it. I've run the division 3 times. So I'm well versed, and I'm very, very passionate about traffic enforcement. So what I'm really here to do tonight is to help educate and to get you an idea of what are all these numbers about. What's the 85th percentile? What's the 15th percentile? Where do we get, what's 4802? How does this regulate us? Because I want everybody here, and especially the folks who live on these streets, to be educated about why we're doing what we're doing. So I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson, if I could. So going way back, we're talking 30, 40, 50 years ago, the courts came up with this rule of when radar started to become popular and it was being used to enforce on the streets with the 85th percentile. And what they decided and what they actually ruled on was that 85% of the drivers out there are good drivers. That's me, that's Cedric, that's you folks here, that's the folks sitting in the gallery here. We're the good drivers. It's the top 15% that are the speeders. The top 15% don't care what's posted. They're in a hurry. They want to go where they want to go. They want to do what they want to do. It's that top 15%, right? But it's the 85th percentile that keeps everything regulated. And essentially what that means is I could put you as a driver on a roadway, let's say San Antonio or Foothill or whatever road you want, not put any signs whatsoever. You would get a sense based on the traffic conditions, based on the people that are on the street, the width of the roadway, the weather conditions, what the right speed should be within probably plus or minus 5 miles an hour. And that's, if you go back to that other slide, Cedric, the one that had all the 85th percentiles on it. If you look at this here, a lot of these aren't far off. They're pretty close. You have a few that are a little bit higher, but some of these just barely made it. We almost were able to make it at 25, but it was pretty darn close. And so typically what you're seeing, or I'll tell you what I see. I've been with the department for 18 years. I've done traffic for quite a bit of time. What I tend to see in the trends are your average drivers, if it's in a 25 mile an hour speed range, they're probably going about 20 to 30 miles an hour, average. If it's anything else, the top speeders, that 15 percentile I was telling you about, they're usually around 40 to 50. All right, 40, 50. 50 being the high end, the very high end. Most of them 40, 45, maybe some 35s in there. But it's very, very different. We talked a little bit earlier about those stalker radar trailers. Well, some of that data that I read it every week because my parking enforcement guy puts those radar trailers out there, and then we download the information. I go over it. And what we're seeing are these spike trends. So you're seeing that 85th percentile around that small area, that 10 mile an hour range within the speed limit, and then you get like a few dabs of cars in between, and then you hit that 15 percentile, and it goes way up. And that's what you're seeing, that 40 to 50 mile an hour range, right? That's where the big speeders are. Okay, so that's 85th percentile, that's 15th percentile. So then we talk about 4802. So 4802, the California Vehicle Code says this: you have to have a traffic engineering survey to do radar or LiDAR. You can't do it without it. There are some exceptions, though. One, schools. School zone is exempt. Two, senior citizen facility. If anybody's been on Fremont in front of where MSC is, it's posted senior facility. Doesn't require a survey. So those are the two, school zones, while kids are going to and from school, and then the senior citizen facilities. The section that we mostly cite is 22350 of the California Vehicle Code. That's unsafe speed. So it is incumbent upon me. I have the burden of proof to show that it was speed unsafe for those conditions, which means if it's posted 25 or 30, I can't cite somebody for 31. It wouldn't make sense, right? I go into a court, well, Your Honor, speed limit is 30. They were going 31. How does that feel to you folks? Doesn't feel pretty fair, does it? Wait a minute, what about speedometer error? What about conditions for the roadway? If somebody, so what we have to do is we have to look at it and go, okay, as a police officer, with my knowledge, and basing it on the roadway conditions, the time of day, how many kids or pedestrians are on the street, how many bicyclists are on the street, what are the traffic conditions like? Is it heavy? Is it raining? Is there fog? And then we have to determine, okay, where are we going to cite drivers at? So it's very different if you're taking Foothill Expressway, which is 45 miles an hour, and Foothill Expressway in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. Are you going to cite somebody at 47, 48? Probably not. It's going to be a little bit higher than Foothill Expressway in rush hour traffic while it's raining and there's fog out and there's bicycles on the street. Mm-hmm. That's going to lower that threshold. So that's what we're looking at. So I know a lot of folks are concerned about raising the speed limit. Wait, does raising the speed limit mean that all of a sudden people are going to speed more, or they're going to speed at a higher speed? Probably not. And I'm basing that off of experience. I'm basing out the numbers that I'm seeing when I collect data on the streets from our radar trailers. So like I told you before, we were talking about the 85th percentile and that 15th percentile, that sweet spot, 40 to 50 miles an hour on surface streets, that's what you're going to see. So even if you were to take it from 25 to 30, most of those good drivers are still going to be within that 20 to 30 mile range. You're still going to see those top 15% at that 40 to 50. Okay, if they go any faster, we don't need a survey anyway, because there's one more exemption. It's called 22349A of the California Vehicle Code, which states anytime you go over 65 miles an hour in the state of California, unless it's otherwise posted, Highway 5 is posted at 70, right? You can't do it. Don't need a survey for it. Now ask me how many times I see people traveling 66 miles an hour on Covington. Doesn't happen. 99% of the time I'll say it doesn't happen. Is there always that one time? Sure. Probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's somebody going 60 miles an hour or something like that. We might pick something like that up, but it's very, very rare. You're going to see that sweet spot, which is that 40 to 50 miles per hour. So what do we do in my division? I'm education and enforcement. We're the 3 E's. This is my engineer. We're taking care of the education now. Well, now it gets to enforcement. And that's really the bread and butter here, folks. To lower speeds, you have to do enforcement. So right now, Covington, Miramani, Cuesta, I'm getting complaints in. What can I do? That much. Because if I pull anybody over, and I think City Council actually asked this question last time, well, can you pull over the car, sign in for speed, and then just kind of roll the dice and gamble when you go to court? Only if I want to go to federal court, because then I'll be violating their constitutional rights. There's no probable cause to stop those vehicles. Can't do it. So without the backing of the traffic engineering survey, we sit there and we just watch cars go by. It doesn't matter if they're going fast by kids. It doesn't matter if, people complain about it. I can't do a darn thing about it. Even if it's 50, 55 miles an hour on that street, it doesn't matter. I can't do a darn thing. So you raise that to 30. Okay, does it look on the surface like it's going to increase speeds? Sure, I can understand that. But what you're really going to see is more enforcement, because now I can tell my guys and gals to get out there and start writing tickets. And what happens when we all see a police officer on the side of the road, including myself, when the car's on the side of the road lit up and somebody's in front of them? I'm glad I wasn't that guy. I'm going to slow down. It makes an effect. Not just the one stop that you make. That one person that you're giving a ticket to, it affects everybody driving by. So now I'm stopping cars on these streets, and everybody's double checking, they're checking themselves, and they're slowing down. I'll give you one more example. It's also a great tool for our folks working nights, not just for speed enforcement, but think about the burglaries that happen in town. You see that car that's driving 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, what's that car driving through town? Well, let me tell you, now I'm sitting on the side of the road, I hit it with my radar, they're doing 45 or whatever in a 30 or 37 or 38. Can I stop that car now? Sure I can. I've got probable cause to stop that car. Could that possibly be a burglar? Might be. It's one more tool for my guys and gals to use to now stop a car. I'm going to open that up to any questions, if that's okay with you, Cedric.
So is it the survey that you need, or is it that the signage needs to change to match the survey?
The
Yep.
survey needs to be approved by the governing board, and then they can change the signs.
Yes.
Oh, wait, because I didn't understand. It said in 2007, the survey was adopted. In 13, it was recertified. In 16, it was recertified. What was not happening to get
Those certain streets weren't, the 85th percentile was too high. So we'll take a look at Grant to Arboretum. So yeah, the 85th percentile speed is 37. So you round to the nearest 5 mile an hour increment. That's
All right,
30.
which one? Grant to Arboretum, yeah.
Yes, third
Okay.
one down. 85th percentile is 37. So if you round it to the nearest 5 mile an hour increment, that would be 35. And then Cedric is allowed to drop it 5 miles an hour to 30. Unfortunately, council did not want to drop it to or raise it to 30. It's in a
Currently at
25 mile an
25.
hour zone right now.
So
you can't
what's the point of doing this?
force it, is what you're saying? is you
Correct. I
You
can
can't
do
enforce it
zero
if it's-
enforcement. I can do zero radar or LiDAR enforcement.
You can do the trailing behind of car enforcement, but you
Yes.
can't do LiDAR or radar unless it's at 30.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about pacing as well. Like Cedric mentioned before, pacing is great on expressways and freeways. It's very, very difficult to sit there, see a car, go by at a speed. Okay, now I need to get into traffic. Now I need to get behind it. Well, by the time it's ahead of me now, it's 1,000 feet. I have to double my speed to catch up to that car. and then hopefully they didn't see me, and now I have to pace them for at least an eighth of a mile. Quarter of a mile is nice. It makes it incredibly difficult.
So, I'm, for 10 years, you have not been able to cite people on any of these streets.
Well, that's correct.
Which are the ones that people feel people are going and speeding the most.
Yeah, Cuesta is a great example. Cuesta, I used to work all the time until this came about. And I'll go a little bit further back in history. What happened actually at one point, our surveys for the entire city were terrible. I went to court. There was a commissioner, Stephen Yip, who was a former motor officer for Santa Clara PD. He's now a commissioner. I went to court. I was brand new. I didn't know anything about this stuff. And he went, rejected. He said, take a look at your surveys, and he gave me all this information. He said, I want you to go back to your department. I want you to take a look at your surveys. It prompted an internal investigation by myself. I made a report to the chief of police at the time, and we had no surveys. So then we had to redo them in, I think it was 2005 or 2007. And that's when we started to get some streets back. I mean, absolutely no streets in our town were being enforced. None. Because we had bad surveys.
I'm curious, what's the cost of these surveys that we are ignoring repeatedly?
Ignoring? Oh, in terms of like enforcement?
Yeah, I mean,
But
we
what do
do
you-
these surveys and then we totally ignore the data that we get from it, it sounds like. So what does that cost?
What you mean, the
That we're kinda-
posting, the posting ignores the results of the survey and
Right.
therefore makes them invalid.
Correct. If we were to post it at the correct speed, which it should be, which is 30. So you have to understand, all the streets in Los Altos, most streets are 25. We have the expressway that's 45. We have San Antonio that's 35. El Camino is 35. And we have parts of Fremont that are 30. It's saying basically, based on the formulas, that these streets should be posted at 30. Unfortunately, the decision was made to leave them at 25. Therefore, my team can't do enforcement.
But you explained this to city council at the time when they said, no, we're not going to raise the speed from 25
Yeah,
to
so
30?
both presentations, we explained the process and the reasons why we want this to be approved and the lack of enforcement that can result if it's not approved.
Well, you know what, guys?
Can I just ask a question?
Of course.
What are we missing? Like, what's the rationale? It just doesn't make any sense to me, and we're all intelligent people, so, I mean, I wasn't here at the time, but there
Right.
must have been some sort of, whether you
And I
agree
didn't
with the
present to
rationale or
council
not.
either. So, right. I think it really comes down to education. I'm very, very passionate about this. I mean, I'd like to say I sleep with the vehicle code at night, but I'm very passionate about it.
I hope not.
And I think sometimes it really is about education. And there's a fear. There's a legitimate fear by residents that if you raise the speed limit to 30, then that means instead of people that were doing 50 before, now they're going to do 55.
Right.
I understand that. I really do. I understand it, and I can appreciate that. But the data and my experience has shown that those folks are already speeding. You have a street right now where, how's it going to hurt? Right now, you're getting zero enforcement. There's nothing to slow down your drivers. I mean, could we put speed bumps on every street? Sure. Could we do chicanes on every street? Sure. That's an engineering thing. But sooner or later, people aren't wanting to drive on any streets whatsoever, and now you've destroyed traffic completely. So it's just not legitimate. So enforcement is where we come in.
So maybe here's so if we recommend this and then council also approves it, do you have the resources to enforce? Because it's one thing being able to enforce,
Yes.
and it's another thing actually enforcing.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah. I mean, we're building right now, we are going through a bunch of hiring right now. We're trying to fill spots and whatnot. But council just approved an additional traffic officer. So we'll be 4. And you'll be happy to hear that means we'll be the same force as Mountain View. Palo Alto doesn't even have traffic enforcement anymore.
I'm kind of taking them out.
They had to do away with it, and it's astonishing. The number one complaint in town is traffic. It's traffic, and and not only in our city do the traffic enforcement guys and gals do enforcement, patrol does as well. All patrol officers are radar and LiDAR certified. So everybody gets in on it. So yeah.
You know,
Ask one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't see anything about from Foothill to 280
Yes.
on El Monte or Magdalena. are those certified or not certified, or what's?
previously certified
Yeah.
in 2016.
Yeah, and the speed limit from, on El Monte, from Foothill to, I think it's Voorhees is 30. And then it actually goes up all the way up to the college. I believe it almost hits 40. It goes 35 and then I think 40.
And that's within the 85th. Just seems like no one's
Yeah,
ever
are
tried
those-
it.
Were those
section
going
of El Monte between Foothill and
You
Voorhees.
should talk into the mic so people can.
Oh, sorry.
Online.
So in that section of El Monte, it's 30 miles per hour that you were talking about, but it's not enforceable because it's. I think you were recommending 35. Was it 35?
I can't remember,
Yeah.
yeah. And then also part of that is also the county.
Yeah.
That's
But so it's not enforceable between, but that's not on this list of, is this a comprehensive list or this is a partial list
Let's see.
that we're looking at?
Well, El Monte too, we'd have to look at what the speed limit is with the county because it's weird the way.
Oh, you
that
know
they-
why? Because the time we did this, there was construction going on, so we couldn't do the radar yet. Yeah. So we had to reshoot that again anyway.
And half the street is owned by county, half the street is owned by us. It
And Ma-
splits up before Summerhill.
Right.
So we'd have to look at what the county survey, if they do a survey, is so that we're consistent.
Well,
In
so
Magdalena?
we come down, you get off 280. It's one speed limit on that first section of El Monte. And then when you cross out of county jurisdiction, it drops because it's under our jurisdiction.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's faster where the school is.
Any other
But there is a
questions?
school there, but the school is in the county, St. Nicholas.
There is
Yeah.
a school there, and there is a small school zone, so that is 25 miles an hour when school's in session, when children are going to and from school in the recess.
And what about Magdalena?
Magdalena is 30 miles an hour. That is the sheriff's office, and that
Yeah.
is a valid survey. We work that all the time. We can use the county survey for that.
I've seen them all the time on Magdalena. Feels like that's a spot. I know, slow
Yeah, we
down.
work out there. We do joint enforcement with California Highway Patrol and also with the sheriff's office. And remember this too, we now have started a joint enforcement operation with all the other traffic divisions in the county. That's all the agencies now are on board. So every month, you will see about 30 motor officers in town doing joint enforcement. Every month, we pick a city. So ours is March. So in March, just be careful.
Stay home.
There's going to be about 30 to 35 motor
Thanks for
officers.
the heads
in
up.
town, so.
Any other questions of
Yeah,
this?
so I think, Alex, one of the things that I can imagine happens when residents hear that the speed limit's going to go up, like anecdotally, they just presume that people are going to start speeding. And one of the things you mentioned in this report is that there's a study from 92 and 97 where the Federal Highway Administration kind of refutes that intuition, that increased posted speed limits don't result actually in increased vehicle speeds. So my question is, isn't there something more recent that also could, support that? That's 20 years old. I imagine that study is the kind of thing that people would want to.
Well, I couldn't find anything more recent than that. I tried other jurisdictions who want to take on similar studies, but they haven't, and they've always referred back to those two FHWA studies. But during my research, I did find that the other LAPD, Los Angeles, is actually the bigger LAPD, is looking to raise all their speed limits to make it enforceable because they can't do it now.
In residential areas,
Yeah.
is what they're looking at,
Yeah.
yeah. Certain residential areas.
So this education issue is for us, it's for city council, and it feels a lot like this needs to be in the town crier because that's one of the best ways, and also on the website, so that people will understand how, irrespective of the intuition and what people think will happen, in fact, what we're dealing with is an unenforceable speed limit unless it gets raised. I mean, that's the bottom line.
This is all completely new to me.
Yeah, I'm actually concerned
kind
by
of
the fact
intriguing.
that we're
None of
making
these.
public all of the places in Los Altos that you can't get a ticket in.
You're not alone.
Today.
Most
I'm a
people
little
I talk to,
concerned by
they're
that.
surprised by this.
No, I do think I've read this before in the town crier when the last time the studies were done. So I remember hearing the issue, but I don't claim to be an expert. But let me ask
anything that makes sense.
one more follow-up question. So let's say this gets approved and do it and you get to start enforcing. When is the next E and TS study where we actually get to go back and see whether we
Increase to speeds.
increasing, decreasing, enforcement,
So
what?
we would go back in 5 years. In 5 years.
5 years.
So five,
a long time.
if the conditions haven't changed in the area, I can, by the codes, I can just re-up it and just let the commissions and the council know I'm re-upping based because conditions haven't changed.
No,
Um,
Sally, are you asking, like, we will
I'm-
know if we.
Yeah, I
had
think
the
that
effect
feels
of
like a long
increasing-
time, especially if, again, with so the part of this is the education and taking and believing the data. And I do, having heard the pitch, but I mean, for some people, I think it might be hard. 5 years is a long time if you feel that people are now speeding faster. So, I mean, 2 years or something, I mean, to get some feedback on how it's going.
Right, I understand that, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I
Well,
think that probably MUTCD probably lays out something, why they need such a, whatever period of time.
Well, I mean, the council can direct, or the commission can direct staff to, or request staff to relook at it again.
Also, didn't Mr. Wing point out that these portable radar?
He's one of the speakers.
Well, but he did point out that there are these portable devices that you get your data from, Officer
Yes.
Brooks.
Yes.
And in fact, one city council could choose, if they wanted to before the 5-year period, at the 2-year period, they could do a random sampling, put these carts on 3 of the more significant streets and say, how we doing? And post that data.
It's already here. I mean, here's
No, but I'm-
2013 to 2016, so it
Well,
seems like.
what
we're-
I'm-
saying that would be 5 years normally, and we're saying,
Well,
can you
Can it
get
be-
To officially change it, I think, right?
Well-
Versus
Yeah, but
gathering data.
we're just talking about data points to measure and seeing how
Right, now,
it's really working.
some things to keep in mind, though, with the radar trailers is they are not a very passive system. They're there to reduce speeds. So where Cedric would have something where there are the tubes on the roadway, where they're unobtrusive, people don't see red light.
Fast
red
enough
lights
to
flashing
slow
at
down.
them, And, so forth, might be a little
Yeah.
bit more accurate
Yeah.
representation.
Because when we collect the speed, the speeds, we have a vehicle with a radar gun, unmarked. So, as if it's a normal condition, get people in their true behavior.
Yeah, in fact, there are certain rules that say we cannot do any enforcement
Yeah.
2 weeks prior to Cedric collecting any data. We can't even be out on the street. I mean, unless we make a random stop on somebody, but we cannot influence traffic in any way, because it'd be great. I go out there for 2 weeks, I stop everybody, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing 15 miles an hour, and now it gives you skewed data, and that would be unfair. So we can't even sit out there with our lights on, just being there. We have to be very, very careful, and it's only during certain times of the day you can collect the data, and so there's a lot
No
of
rain,
regulations.
no
Yeah.
special events.
Nothing that would falsely decrease that
Yeah.
speed. They always want to go in favor of
The rain,
the majority of the
Huh?
public.
it does rain. So why
Well, but
wouldn't
not
that
in the
be
summer.
considered-
I mean, maybe in the springtime we'll
But
do it, in summertime
If
we'll
you're
do
raising
it.
the limit, then would that still apply for the times it's raining, that same limit?
Yeah.
It would, but
Or-
like I was stating before, when we go to do enforcement, when it rains, or if there's any inclement conditions, that's going to lower our threshold for enforcement, based on the section 22350, which is unsafe speed. I just kind of want to reiterate that, because that is really our bread and butter, is 22350. We have to abide by that unsafe speed, and it's unsafe speed for
Oh,
conditions.
based
Based
on
on the
your
conditions.
own judgment?
Right, basing, on our experience, our training, and looking at the roadway conditions and everything that I mentioned before. So that's why sometimes it varies.
Any other questions of them?
Thank you, a very
That was very
cogent-
educational.
Cogent
Very
presentation.
welcome, thank you.
We have 3 speakers. Jim, you want to come up? Jim Wing? Item 5.
Again, I'm Jim Wing, I live on Milverton Road, who has had a lot of Officer Brooks' officers and things, particularly on Milverton and particularly on El Monte, too, just around the corner.
Mr. Wing, could you move the microphone so it's closer to you? Thank you.
Okay, let's see if this works better. First of all, thanks to Officer Burke, for coming anyway, to shedding some real street input to you so you can understand how things are kind of really working. I would like to add a few more things which may not be quite as positive as Officer Brooks' statement. First of all, we do have a new friend called Waze. I have measured the reaction time of Waze. When an officer is standing on the street, the Waze will pick up him and post the speed trap sign within 10 minutes. Then when he leaves, Waze takes it off about the same time. And the ebbs and flows and speeds of cars reacts to that. When he's there, down they go. But they know he leaves very fast. And our main speeding problem are the cut-through commuters, particularly in the PM, who drive by Waze. Also, we have to be, what I've been told by a clerk at the court, a deputy sheriff, and a Los Altos police officer. When you're out doing radar work, there is some caution as to when do you write a ticket. Because, say you wrote a ticket for 34 and a 25, more than likely the judge would dismiss the case. So therefore, there is a natural tendency to go higher in the speed. And I don't quite know how Officer Brooks handles that, and it varies from time to time, but there is that going on. Because keep in mind, the officer does have to go to court, and so he loses an afternoon or so of sitting in court when that occurs. In terms of effectivity, radar with an officer has some limits. But what I've noticed, now keep in mind, the speed carts have been on my street for 7 weeks in the last 6 months. And most of the time it's parked in front of my house. I welcome it. So therefore, and I've gained an education from them. And basically, they do, on Milverton Road, have reduced the speeds, or the cars will start to reduce their speed, 70% of them will. If the strobe light, the red-white strobe light goes on, that goes up quite a bit. And the way I obtained this data was by backing off. Mm-hmm. You want to ask a question?
I would like to hear how you got 70%, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
Basically, in two different sessions, two different carts. And keep in mind, these carts, I had them set it at, the sign will display at 25 miles per hour, and the red strobe to go on at 35. And so I'm backing off about 250 feet just before the cart starts to display, and then you hear the cars go by, and I'm standing there, and then when the sign starts to display, then you listen for them to at least back off the accelerator. Very few ever put the brakes on, but at least back off the accelerator, and that's how I got the 70%. And then one time I had them set the strobe at 30, and I was able to get a pretty good grasp on the effectivity of the red strobe light. And so 2 sessions, 20 cars each session, so it's out of 40 cars. And and that's that's street data, so to speak. Anyway, it's not official. So in general, I think there maybe is some reason why council has chose to keep things lower is the effectivity of police radar versus other devices. And by the way, the speed carts are passive. On our street, we were counting cars one time, and so therefore we set the display speed at 40, and it never went on. So therefore we counted cars, and I don't think people noticed it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Harry Guy.
Harry Guy. I live on University Avenue near Redwood Grove, and you've got it. That's the first message is you got the education tonight that I didn't have until I didn't have it finished until today. But over the last week, I've been talking to Cedric and Officer Brooks, and so I got the education too. And I think I'm pretty typical of what has happened the last 2 times this has come to council, and I was there on those 2 times and was silent, but I don't want to be silent this time because I think I've got it. And so I was typical before of, okay, I don't like the idea of drivers setting the posted speed limits in principle. I can not like that, but it's the law. I mean, that's how it happens. Okay, so now deal with it. And I think the compelling pieces are that you got, that I finally got, are that we're not doing any enforcement until somebody goes 66 miles an hour on one of those streets. I don't live on one of those streets that's impacted by this. I drive on them all the time, and cars pile up behind me, and I get the wave or the horn, or people drive past me. You know, they pass me. Well, you probably experienced that too. So I'm at a point where I'm starting to get convinced this is the right thing to do, but I think the people you need to hear from are the people that are impacted on those streets. And there aren't, I don't know if any of them are here tonight, but I think the things that this commission and BPAC really ought to do is not necessarily make a recommendation to council or a decision on that tonight, but actually engage with BPAC and engage with these 2 people and go out and do some outreach and do the education part of the 3 E's to those groups. And I can tell you that they have access to who those key people in the groups that can assemble the groups along those streets that live on those streets. So they know who they are. Is that a lot of work? Yeah, it's a lot of work. Do you get to the right place? And we haven't gotten probably to the right place the last 2 times we've done this. And I think that's the way to get to the right place. Thanks.
Thanks, Harry. Former Commissioner John Bear.
Good evening. Welcome to a no-win situation. All right. A decade before I was on Planning Commission, and I was on Planning Commission for 9 years, I was part of the nascent Traffic Advisory Task Force, which was the predecessor to the Traffic Commission, which ultimately merged in with the Planning Commission. And unfortunately, you were all surprised to hear what's going on with traffic. Those of us who have dealt with that over the last 20 years are not surprised. Yeah, it is a problem with enforcement, and I have tremendous sympathy for the police department because they don't have a tool. On the other hand, you know, when you raise the speed limit, the people who are driving 25, or come on, let's face it, posted limit's 25, we all go closer to 30. So the law-abiding people go faster, okay, because the speed limit goes up, and then perhaps you can catch the people who are going a lot faster. But overall, you're still increasing the speed of that a lot of those people on the road, right? That's what happens. Now, what's the solution? I'm not sure there is a good solution because unfortunately, one of the things I can tell you over the last 20 years is that enforcement goes up and down. It goes up and down because the police department doesn't always get staffed, and we've had ups and downs in staffing over 20 years. We used to have a motorcycle brigade. That disappeared for a number of years. It's a problem, and it's not that the police department isn't committed, but it's a resource allocation issue. And when there are burglaries, when there are accidents, that's where the police resources have to go. So I started off by telling you it's a no-win situation. It is a no-win situation. But one of my suggestions, before you make a recommendation to raise the speed limit, is I would encourage you and Cedric to look at what happened on Springer. Springer, the speed got raised. Okay? see what happened to the speed. See what happened to enforcement on Springer where it got raised. Again, there is no good solution here. And unfortunately, the problem is not the speed limit. The problem is the California law. And you and I are not going to change that today or tomorrow, but that's a fundamental problem. It is a flaw in the law that ultimately creates a problem for communities such as ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh.
Can I
Okay,
just ask a question?
yeah, that's next.
Well,
To
you're
John?
referring to something about Springer. Yeah,
Yes, Springer, the speed did get raised. I don't remember the number of years ago, but it did get raised from, Cedric, you'll probably know this, from 25 to 30?
Yeah,
that just happened.
it was 25 to 30.
Okay.
And it happened
the
when? Sorry.
question is, what's the result of that? Because I think, look, every time this has come before council, it doesn't happen because this is it's a community and a political issue, and it's a hot potato, because residents really are reluctant because they are rightfully concerned what's going to happen, not when there's enforcement, but when there isn't enforcement. And I personally would rather see more police officers on the street or on the roads. I'd rather see more radar flashing things as a way of substituting when you don't have officers on the street. But without that, my question is your speed, are your average speeds going to go up? And I think the answer is yes.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Cedric. What was the date when Springer's speed limit went from 25 posted to 30?
It preceded my time, but we recently got Springer back in terms of enforcement in 2016.
So 2016, it became enforceable this past year.
In 2016.
It's a little bit of a trick question because half of it was enforceable in Mountain View. So Mountain View shares half of that street. Mountain View had it at 30, we had it at 25. We could not enforce our side, which is the west side of the street. They have the east side of the street. Once you pass Cuesta, it becomes ours. That was 25. I think everything was raised to 30 just recently.
Okay, so is it too soon to have feedback on whether, as you say, the 85% people who would normally be law-abiding or close to it have changed their patterns?
Yeah, I would say it's way too soon.
Okay.
Way too soon to see. Yeah. In fact, we haven't even had we don't have requests for putting the trailers out there at all, and it's just been recent for enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious how enforcement has changed now that you can enforce it.
On Springer in particular?
Yeah, I mean, how often are you enforcing, and how many people?
Yeah, it just depends on the regular rotation. With Springer, I can tell you with 30 miles an hour, it's rarely enforced because when I go out there to work it, people aren't speeding.
Right. That's helpful data.
Well, again, this is something that you want us to vote on, David, right? Is this something that we want to?
We need to provide a recommendation to council.
Recommendation down. So we're recommending.
We would, if we were to do it, we would recommend approval of the engineering and traffic surveys to City Council.
That's right.
But I think we
But are
need
we
some
gonna-
discussion
but would we
because we're
also-
waiting to discuss.
But would we also just approve the survey and the study, or do we want to make a recommendation?
Well, we don't approve it, it exists. I mean, it's been certified.
Right.
I guess I have a question for Cedric then. Does the recommendation to pass on to forward the surveys also include the recommended speed limit changes?
Yes. So going back to your question, Chair, are you asking us to look at our current valid surveys and test them by taking speeds and seeing if they're within the speed limit?
That wasn't my, no,
Okay.
that was not my question. My question more had to do with procedure and what it is that we really, if anything, wanted to recommend to the city council other than just approval of a survey, which seems to be just a blanket okay.
Well, no, what he's saying is he would like us to recommend, to approve, if we believe that, the recommended speed limit changes based on the surveys.
So,
So
upon
that's
approval of the
last page.
survey, then we change the signs.
Okay, that's what I was hoping it was. Okay, great.
So one thing that I think would be helpful is I certainly heard a recommendation. It sounded like, I mean, it'd be very helpful if it was formally stated that it's not just city staff and, you know, transportation service managers, but LAPD itself also recommends this. I mean,
Is that
that's-
little LA or big LA?
Us LA, yes.
Okay.
The important
Us LA. Yeah, the important LA. LAPD North, that's right. Because we've certainly heard your compelling data, which is not totally consistent with some of the statements that the audience have made, but they are learned as well. But so, I mean, to me, I think part of the packet is not just us saying it, but it's also staff recommends, LAPD recommends, and here's the basis. The other thing I was going to say that I've heard on, well, I've read a lot on Nextdoor where people complain about everything, including traffic. And I see a lot of complaints about Cuesta in particular. I don't know if that's a Cuesta contingent over there, but no, look, maybe not. Maybe Springer contingent. Miramonte, okay. But I think that I do think there's a lot of value to public outreach. So if you were to get up at the library one evening and you posted that you were going to give one or two of these talks and you went through that, then we could have some public dialogue, because I think you know, to make a recommendation in isolation of the community hearing the information, I think it is fraught with hazard.
Well, do I hear a
Wait,
Yeah,
Ronnie
there's
had
further
sorry,
discussion.
I
Yeah.
would take a different position, because I think the reason that for 10 years we have not been doing enforcement on the roads where we need it most is because when push comes to shove, council may have a lot of residents that, from their own anecdotal evidence, don't believe that increasing the speed limit will actually make the speed, you know, make this the roads actually safer. But the data actually shows it. It's like, you know, when we talk about, and that's what I rely upon, and that's the benefit of us being an appointed commission, not, you know, elected, is that, you know, we can take the anecdotal evidence and compare it to the factual
Evidence
data
based.
and the surveys and the studies that conclude that that's not what is happening, and the police officers report that he's not ticketing people because people are abiding by the and make a recommendation. So my instinct is to make a recommendation. And when I think anecdotally, and I would dismiss my own anecdotal evidence and in favor of the data, is that I don't know that a 5-mile-per-hour difference would even register, like when I'm driving.
Probably not.
I'm not looking at the speed limit that often that I'm driving. There is just a natural speed that you go in areas based on the road and traffic and daylight and all that kind of stuff. So these 85th percentiles make a lot of sense to me. But at the end of the day, it's not like what makes what I think I'm doing, but what the data is showing is in my mind the most persuasive evidence. So if we want to enforce these streets where we really need it the most, I think we should move forward with it.
Bobby?
I would add, oh, sorry.
Well, I do agree that the law must be flawed, because if really this area if a street has a 25 per miles an hour sign, and that's appropriate for that street, then why cannot that be enforced? I understand all the data and what's happening in reality, but I do happen to have children, both my children, that go through these streets with their bikes every morning. So, and I do understand that you won't be there every morning to protect my children. So, I have a really hard time, and I imagine if I were to agree with this, that I would have a lot of parents angry at me for doing this because of the fact that they don't understand the logic behind it. And so I would really appreciate some more public outreach like you suggested, just to kind of back me up. If I were to support it, it's going to be tough to get through to other parents on that one. And then again, some sort of guarantee of enforcement, because that's really what we're banking on, that it's going to be enforced. So right now I'm really on the fence. We'll see what others think.
So I think that whenever we make our recommendation to council, we have to be as specific as possible so they understand that it is a very tough sell, that a lot of what the data shows is counterintuitive. And so if one resident says, I think people are going faster, and the police officer anecdotally says, I haven't been giving out tickets because they're not going faster, they're both anecdotal. But if we're going to make our decisions on evidence-based surveys, which have been certified, and it's paired with the fact that there's a state law that mandates the lack of enforcement without following evidence-based data, then I think it's a no-brainer. The problem is, it is not that it's no win, it's that, as Bahi said, the police department has things to do. It's not like they're sitting in the station eating chocolates and watching TV during the day. And so if we give them the opportunity to enforce, and as Officer Brooks says, there is going to be at least one other body on the street, that's already a 25% improvement, but they have other things to do. So if we give them the tools to enforce based on the evidence that's here, and we recommend to City Council that they do raise the limits even though it's counterintuitive, then it has to be paired with an enforcement allocation of funds, because what we have from Dave Crook is, in his letter, he points out that he was tricked before because they say things are going to happen and then there's insufficient funding. So I can say that I can support and recommend approval of the engineering traffic surveys with their recommended speed limit changes, even though it's counterintuitive, provided that there is tremendous community outreach and that there is a will that's presented with money behind it by City Council, that if the department is given the tools to enforce, that they're also given the money to enforce as well.
So I'm conflicted.
No, that's a wrong word. Don't say that word because it has a different meaning here.
For a different reason, because I'm probably one of the 15%.
Oh, God.
So I'm hoping that City Council.
Make a note of that.
But I don't necessarily, I'm not sure that it's necessarily counterintuitive, because if, we go from 25 to 30 or 30 to 35, those people that are still going, yes, more people may be going slightly faster, but those aren't the people that are going to hurt necessarily someone else. It's the people that are going 50 miles an hour that are going to really cause the damage. And not being able to enforce that is absolutely, in my mind, ludicrous.
Yeah, me too.
Good point.
And I would rather stop a couple guys going 50 miles an hour on some of these streets than be worried about the law-abiding citizens going from 30 to 35 miles an hour. And to me, it's really, it shouldn't be a political issue because this is so basic and and I think would make things much safer. I can't imagine someone sitting through Officer Brooks' educational process that he just went through and not reaching the same conclusion. And so hopefully if you get the chance to get in front of City Council, I'm hopeful that they see it the same way, because I really do think that it can make a difference. And it's not that there's a limited amount of people that you actually have to stop. And the other thing I would say is that it's not mutually exclusive, right? So it doesn't mean that just because we're going to raise the speed limit, we can't be doing all the other things that we're doing, like putting these trailer signs out there that are clocking people's speed limits and reminding them to slow down. I mean, that doesn't have to stop. There's no reason that we can't do both. And so I am strongly in favor. And if you look at the recommendations, there is not one recommendation that is rounding up. In fact, they're rounding down and stepping down from there. And the data is here that shows that there is a natural speed. I can understand why it is a law, because it would seem that otherwise you could have these speed traps where it's just set up to catch people, and you have police officers sitting there with the radar detector, and all of a sudden it goes from 40 to 25, and everyone's getting tickets. And so it does make sense to me. I think there naturally is a natural speed, and I'd be strongly in favor of moving this forward.
Can I ask one follow-up question of Officer Brooks with that? So clarification. So let's say that this goes forward, and we've got these 30-mile-per-hour speed limits. You now have the ability to enforce. What do you measure as success? So are you expecting next time? What will these 85% speed look like, or are they going to be going down or staying the same, or are you just hoping to get more of these 50 to 55 mile per hour drivers, or versus zero? No, not this one specific. So what will be an outcome besides the fact that you can enforce? What will we see?
Well, what I think you're going to see is more drivers that are in the 85th percentile that are going to be adhering to this 30-mile-an-hour zone, and also a decrease in the 15%. What you're probably going to see is a decrease, maybe even if it's by 5%, making it a 90 to 10% ratio is going to be a huge increase. It's going to be great. Reason being is I can't tell you how many complaints I get from those streets. So the citizens that are on Cuesta, that are on Miramonte, that are on Covington, and that are on El Monte, and those are really the main ones that I'm looking at just off the cuff here. When they say, listen, I need help. I know you put the card out there. That's great. People are still speeding. Okay. And then I'm going to task my officers to go ahead and take care of that. Is traffic enforcement a catch-all? Is it going to be the absolute answer to all of our problems? Absolutely not. Nothing is going to be 100%. But I tell you, right now, what do you have? You have zero. Mm-hmm. You have 0%. The carts go out there, sure. Yeah, but I only have 5.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to get 15 or 20. I mean, they're $10,000 to $15,000 a piece. They're a great tool. They help supplement my officers when we can't be there, but they can only do so much. But I think that's what you're going to see. I don't think it's. I think correct me if I'm wrong. What you're asking is, okay, in 5 years, all of a sudden, are you going to say, well, now do you need to round it up to 35? Mm-hmm. Officer, or are you going to have to post a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit? I 99% highly doubt that will happen. Right. It's going to stay around what you're seeing here.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing. If we're still at the same 85th percentile, then what's our upside? Is again those 15%, or you're saying it might then be 10% that are really, really speeding?
But that's really a 30% change. That's
the goal.
It's going to lower that top 15 percentile. right?
Okay.
That's
Now
the
you're
goal.
keeping those
That's
folks in
the
check.
goal.
The
It's
dangerous
those.
ones.
Okay, so that's the target. So nothing is going to change. If we add another, 2020 column in here, we expect those numbers to potentially look very similar.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's always the potential, too, for them to go down. It might happen. You never know. It could. And when the next time we do a survey, all of a sudden, it could show that, wow, we can actually lower it back down to 25.
So the target is the dangerous outliers.
Yes.
Okay,
I
thank you.
have just a quick follow-up while Officer Brooks is there.
One
So,
more quick follow-up, so we
you
need to
know,
have.
just Fremont to El Monte has a school on it. It has Covington School. I mean, Covington Road between Fremont and El Monte has Covington School on it. Is there a school zone that's dropped there?
Fremont between
That's Covington Road
Covington Road,
between Fremont and El Monte.
between Fremont and El Monte. Yes, that portion
Has a
is a
school-
school zone, yes.
So that's one
portion.
that is enforceable during
Yes.
school hours.
Yes. So- Yeah, only 1,000 feet within the school. So 1,000 feet in either direction.
That would take it
500
from El
feet
Monte,
is
because,
15.
but then a little further down. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
exactly.
No more. You get to go, Jerry.
I don't have to go.
I do have a question. So do you think that having an actual police car sit there with a policeman in there does not do the same job as giving tickets? I mean, would someone has to physically see the ticket being given?
No, they see the lights on.
So the
Okay,
answer is
so
yes,
then-
but they
then
can't be there all the
enforcement-
time.
Yeah, but that's the point, is if the enforcement is the goal,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't really need to issue a ticket. We could just have the car sit there.
So you want a police officer to sit in front
No,
of the
I'm not
school all day
asking- I'm
and with the lights on?
asking- No, I'm asking, wouldn't that do the same, achieve the same purpose, not writing a ticket? I mean, writing a ticket
Well, you tell
alone-
me, how do you feel when you get a ticket?
No, I mean, that's just
It's-
me,
it's an
one
honest question.
person. I'm just, you're affecting only one person and the people who pass by who see your interaction, but
Mm-hmm.
having the police car sit there a whole morning may achieve the same goal, right?
I don't know how I would explain that to my chief, to put an
No, but,
officer there
my
just simply
question is
sitting
that
there,
the
but
actual
I
ticket
understand what
writing
you're saying.
be-
Is it still a distraction? Is it still reducing speeds? To a certain degree, yes.
Uh-huh.
But why not take it further? So when you write that citation, and there's actually, because it's going to get out, you know what, there's an officer that's parked in front of that school all day with the lights on, and they don't stop me, and I went 50 miles an hour past them. Guess what? They're not writing
Might have
tickets.
the opposite
Go.
effect.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
Right,
matter
it
of
could possibly do
resources
that.
after a while. I mean,
Yeah.
you've only got so many.
Yeah, and to answer, like, I heard some questions about, there was some earlier comments about Waze. Waze doesn't affect us. I'm still in a uniform, I'm still writing citations, and I still have a job. So I still write citations all day long. So Waze really doesn't affect us that much. Yeah, and word does get out when people know, especially the high school kids, when they know that you're not running any citations on any of these streets, where it spreads like wildfire.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, now they have a map.
Except March is going to be very interesting.
Okay, I'd like to hear a
Motion.
I think I think you ought to do it, because you came the closest to
Okay, so.
citing what I thought I heard from everybody.
Okay, so I move that we recommend the approval of the engineering and traffic surveys to City Council with the recommendation that the speed limit changes be adopted by City Council on the understanding that that it will require an educational process for the public because it's very counterintuitive, that it is a state law that is mandating the inability of the police department to enforce the speed limits that are posted now. And the reason we're recommending this is because we're using the evidence-based facts presented by surveys that have been certified. And so we're comfortable that in the overall, it will be to the benefit of the town, even if it feels counterintuitive to raise the speed limits, that it will actually serve the safety of the town better.
Any additions, comments? Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, one opposed? 5-4,
5-1.
so it's 5-1? 5-4, rather. Okay.
5 in favor.
Okay, item number 6, design review tour. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a continuation of a discussion we had November.
Yes.
It's like a long time ago.
November 17th.
That was our last meeting, right?
Commission had some questions about a few of the projects, which I've kind of gone over in my report. And so this is really your opportunity to continue your discussion. And some of the themes that we were talking about last time included ways to ensure a more detailed quality of the plans that could be carried forward into the permitting. And there also were some questions about being more careful about material choices. And I think those were the themes that stuck out to me. And so really this is your opportunity to continue this discussion wherever you'd like to take it. I have, if you wish, I have the photos from the last time, and I can bring those up for you on the monitors if you want. It's really up to you.
The one that I wanted to hone in on is when you did a good job in explaining the facts of the stuff we had questions about that you didn't have answers for at the time. The one that I thought was relevant was the original colors and renderings from the PAMF Clinic project on Altos Oaks, where one of our more common complaints is image versus reality. And with the exception of that project that was halfway in Cupertino and halfway in Los Altos, the staff has been very good about making sure that the applicants bring in the actual materials so we can see them, so we don't get snookered. But going to the next, as we spill over into the design review modifications and recommendations, one of the concerns that I have is that we get the image, we have the real samples, and we say, gee, this color isn't quite the same. But then, somewhere along the line, the color gets changed. And so I'd like to revisit that image versus reality versus construction in the next item. So that's the only thing I wanted to talk about on here.
Well, why don't we start with that?
Well, we have to, if anybody else has any comments on the design review tour that we should bring up, because David is prepared.
We're going to
be
go through
quizzed.
about 5 or 6 of them, right? So I'm thinking we ought to do one at a time. So are there any other questions on 373 Pine Lane? I mean, this came up at the last meeting, and that is that the rendering or the colors that we get and then that which ends up on the building often varies to such a degree that we wouldn't have probably approved what ultimately gets built. So I think at the last meeting, as I recall, we talked about having the accuracy of the renderings and the materials be better, so that we will be able to more pinpoint exactly what it is that we recommend, and we would have a way of going back and saying that isn't what we approved, as opposed to having them switch or change or whatever, modify that which we think we approved.
Yeah, and I think in some cases, they are changes that we've administratively approved in our judgment, for better or worse. Sometimes, though, we look at it and have the same questions. The materials look one way under these lights, and they look differently under the solar. So, and we take the sample out and look at the building and they painted the right color. It just doesn't look like the sample we see in the office. So occasionally that becomes the issue, but I think that's probably doesn't account for what I'm hearing. The issue is.
I'll give you an example of what we, if you remember the project on El Camino, where the boardwalk was.
Mm-hmm.
What we approved on the back entrance, and what ultimately got built, because of design changes that went beyond us. We approved something, and then the architects and/or the owners said, that doesn't work, and then we're bypassed, and they go immediately to city staff, and staff approves something different than what the commission approved. I think that's what sort of gets our goat somewhat, is that we thought we approved one thing, and something entirely different surfaced.
Right, and that was a case where I think we have to make a decision: is this a insignificant change or not? I think in hindsight, the fenestration changes on that project. I think looking at it now, I would take it back to the commission.
Do you ever take back at that level when you're after the building permits approved?
We do
or
on occasion.
At the time of building
and it's really just up to ultimately the director. We review it with the director. And
'Cause I think we all think that we should have had a say in that. I mean, I think we should have.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we blew it on that one.
So maybe we, if it's okay with my fellow commissioners, maybe we move this into a combination of items 6 and 7, because when I was reading the report, so for me, it was the definition, if there was possible definition of less than minor changes, which I would call insignificant changes, as opposed to minor changes, and what is a minor change as opposed to a major change to the design approval intent. And I think maybe having it categorized so that the development director can say, okay, an insignificant change is,
Maybe the addition of a small window in a location that's not visible from a public street.
that would be an example. And then a minor change would be the material that they showed you, they've discontinued that color. This is the bête noire of anybody who's in the building industry, is you specify it 6 months before the permit application. The permit goes through. 9 months later, they go to buy it, and the stuff isn't there. Or it's from another part of the quarry, and it's changed, or the budget. So that's is that a minor change where the conditions of approval are jeopardized, where the intention is not maintained?
And I don't think there's a trigger with staff now that says, okay, no, that's a major change and that's a minor change. We should go or shouldn't go back to commission. There's no trigger now.
It's really.
Once we're done, once we're approved, we're done.
Definitions.
It's hard, but it's hard, it is subjective. I mean, I think that's the value of doing something like this, the good, the bad, the ugly, is because if we do this on a yearly basis, then we have these conversations, and, next time they remember, well, this even feels like a change that, is more like the one that they weren't happy that we did, I don't know, that it's going to be hard to define every possible category of change.
Well, that's why I wasn't looking for examples, though they're helpful to the applicant. I was thinking if there was a way of saying something to the effect of there is a design intent that's demonstrated by the drawings, is that intention being maintained by this change? If it went from brushed silver to shiny silver, does that really make a difference to the intention of the design? I don't have an answer, but that would be the criteria, because then when we wanted to say to John, how did you let this get through? He could say, look, it's the same size window, it's in the same position. Instead of brushed, they went to shiny because they thought shiny looked better, it was discontinued, whatever. But the intention of the design really wasn't compromised, whereas they changed the material because it wasn't fitting the budget or it was not available. And it was enough of a change that I was concerned that the design intent, which was a rustic stone, has now shifted to a more formal thing, and therefore might be compromising the design intent. And so I was looking for language that, instead of saying, here's a checklist, does it do this, 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 or this, to see if we could formulate, based on these examples that David has given us, where we feel it went off the rails. And in fact, I think the one that really got us most is the 4940 El Camino one, where the drawings were minimal. There was a certain stylistic thing that we could live with, but in fact, the design didn't live up to even that. And where it went off the rails, I can't speak to, except that, yeah. But I went through these carefully looking at it. For example, in 400 Main, the issue that the town had been very upset about was they felt that there was a wall because the street is actually pretty narrow. And you feel this view through the invisible plane is deceptive because we have a plane here and you don't actually see this. So maybe the expression should be that they do a line outline of the building that you're looking through, so you have the sense that you're looking through a building, so you aren't quite so tricked by that piece of it. And then it's much more colorful, but that I'm willing to give them eyewash for that. That's sort of what they do. And I think that Enchante really has the most representative, and yet they are the most, I don't know, sketchy. It's a drawing. It's not necessarily an architectural, computer-generated, but it really caught the spirit regardless of the material. So I think that's a piece of it. You did such a good job, David. It was so easy to do this. And then the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, I don't think they did themselves justice. The building is much better than the drawings, significantly better than the drawings. But more kudos to staff for being able to say, you know what, this is going to be good.
But to Ronit's point, how do you make it? It's so subjective.
Well, it is.
I don't think you can draw a line and say if it crosses over here, it's non-subjective, and over here it is.
Well, it's going to be subjective, but I think the design intent is really for me, the line I draw in the sand. In that, if the design intent is to have a rustic building with multiple shed roofs and the windows of a certain scale with dividers.
And El Camino would have crossed that line.
It would have.
It would have crossed that line. I agree.
And so, that's a piece. I think Ronit's made an excellent point that if we can look at this cluster and say, of these, the one that snookered us most was the El Camino one, and that the PAMF building didn't do itself any good, but in fact, it turned out to be a good building, so go figure.
That El Camino one, I remember the discussion that we had. We didn't like it. We were begrudgingly approving it, and in retrospect, I wish we had just kind of hammered at it a little bit more.
They obviously didn't listen to us.
Because not only did we not get what we thought we were getting, it was. I also am just the interior kills me when it's a wall of windows that you look into, and you're looking into the innards of the building.
It's ugly.
So you really if we're going to have someone have so much glass, well, we should know what people are going to be seeing when it's dark.
Which didn't show up.
You're looking
Which
in.
did not show up in here at all.
Right. But also we could have had more detail on the windows and just it's a good lesson.
Would you like to see it? It's over here. Hold on.
Oh, that's right.
So it's reflective.
Well, but it's not reflective. In fact, it's reflective during the day because it's lighter outside than it is inside. But at nighttime,
I visited it at night.
It flips. And so I'll tell you this anecdote. When I was in architecture school, one of the first projects, someone in my class designed a bathroom with windows that faced out as you were sitting on the throne. And they said, don't worry, I'll make reflective glass. And then the professor pointed out that at night it switches and you can wave to everyone as you thought you were looking in a mirror, but in fact you were entertaining the whole street. So
Or not.
I wonder how much we would know that the interior was going to be raw. Was that in the plans that we would have seen? Because they show us the interior, they don't say. And by the way, we're going to have exposed surfaces, we're going to have hanging lights.
Right.
It's going to be an undeveloped interior space for
Never came up.
a herd of
That
programmers.
could be cool too, if it's done right.
If it's done right.
Yeah.
But in fact, the level design didn't extend to the interior.
Well, I'm not sure we can, I don't know what we can do.
Are we helping?
We don't like the one on El Camino.
No, but are we helping you understand where to draw the line?
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
Very much so. And I tend to lean towards, this is the project that the Planning Commission or Design Review Commission has approved. This is what you need to abide by. And, oftentimes we can take it back to the Planning and Transportation Commission for a hearing.
And they go, no, no, no.
It makes them go back to the plan that was approved by you. And
But are there examples? Certainly not in my tenure, but I've been here less than a year. Are there examples? You said there were that things come back to PTC. But can those of you who've
Not
been
since
on it
I've
for
been
a
on the
while? Yeah.
I'll tell you the one I remember. It's on 3rd Street. It's shingle, and it was supposed to be a craftsman-style building. And it somehow developed lions in the front.
Oh, the lions. Yes.
And Renaissance chandeliers. And those went in as a minor change, but the applicant came back and said, I don't want to do shingle, it's going to be a maintenance issue. And it came back to the commission, who said, look, you called it a craftsman style, you have all these craftsman style details, you can't change the shingle because that will be the thing that puts it out. So the lions came later, I think after final. The chandelier was never in our purview, it was interior. So it's a little neither fish nor fowl in its final incarnation, but it did hold enough of the integrity, and it did come back for that basic material selection.
Another one was 243rd Street, the mixed-use building next to the Los Altos Grill across the street. And they redesigned the second story to have ribbon windows. And that we thought was a significant change and brought that.
Particularly because ribbon windows are cited in the design review guidelines as not something you want to encourage.
Yeah.
Well,
So the answer is yes.
Okay, so those are two.
Well, this isn't anything we vote on, we just, I guess what we're trying to do is just express our
Based on your judgment, it's basically.
To help.
concerns.
We want to help.
Because we get asked, well, I get asked, how did you approve that? And I go, we really didn't approve that. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where you can't say I wasn't on the commission then because you've been on long
Been
enough,
on
you
long
were
enough,
on the
I've approved
commission.
them all, so, and that's what we want to avoid. This is what we approved and this is what we didn't approve. Okay. 7 is design review
We
modifications
just talked about that.
and recommendations, so I guess we just did both. All right, commissioners' reports and comments. Has anybody been to a meeting?
I got lucky because I was covering the December 13th meeting, which was, well, we were all going to be, it was going to be the study session, but it got canceled.
I got
so.
lucky because you all attended the meeting that I was supposed to cover last Tuesday.
Oh, the study
So
session.
you all know what
We weren't here the whole time.
Yeah, it's true. It did go to like 11:30. What was the issue that they talked about after everyone left? Oh, they talked about Lacey. Sure you've read the
Whether they
paper.
were going to do the agreement.
Whether we should open into exclusive discussions with Lacey about the possibility of them donating the funds to build a park and underground the parking.
And that
And it
passed.
narrowly passed.
Yes.
By 3-2.
In the Town Crier, I read today that, because I get it the day late, I read it later, that one of the council members said it'd be like exercising,
That was the
running,
best comment. She
and you
said,
pass a diamond, but you don't stop to pick it up because you don't want to stop your exercise.
I repeated that like 3 times. It was so funny.
It was a good comment.
It was good.
Who did that?
Who
said that?
Mary.
Mary Prophet.
Yeah. So that passed.
Okay.
And that, that will move forward. And then the other piece of that related to that was, they had 2 things, Lacey.
Well, there was no decision that I could tell about whether there was any public benefit that would allow the council to support the story. I don't think there was a decision on that because the applicant was asking what it could be, and they were saying,
Suggestion.
don't ask us, show us what you think it is.
I thought Alex had a really good point that we should consider having a study session to brainstorm all the possible public benefits we and the public can actually come up with, because they're so open to
Right.
doing whatever.
They're
to
getting
communicate.
penalized for
They're just
trying
gonna-
to go over and above.
So do we have enough support to suggest that as an agenda item? I can support that.
Well, that's the next one. That's
And also, I didn't, not having been there, but listening to it from afar, though I had some Wi-Fi hiccups, I didn't understand why the park itself was off the table as a public
Because it's
benefit.
owned by the city. It's not their land.
Right. It's,
No, but
it's
underground
not a-
parking by putting.
I mean, the city would still have parking, and then there would be a park. It'd be having your cake and having a park. and-
Yeah, I think,
It's a
personally, I
polit-
think it
yeah,
was a
it's a political-
mistake
Yeah.
by Lacey.
But
to
they
not
were, they
have-
were informed that that was not, they could not use that as a public benefit. That was given as an a priori decision.
interesting.
They had to do something with theirs.
Right. Can I ask a question, just because I started thinking about this more once I left, and the fog cleared? To be honest, I didn't really even understand why it was a discussion, right? Because we changed the building code to say that we would consider 3-story buildings
A height, a certain
or
height.
35 feet, whatever it was, in exchange for, in exchange for something, right?
Exchange for a public benefit.
Public benefit.
Right.
A significant public benefit.
So why is it even I guess, just why is it even a question then of would they consider 3 stories in exchange for a public benefit? Because
That's not the
already-
question. The
okay.
question is, what public benefit would be significant enough that they would be willing to consider using that exception?
Yeah,
Well,
it
what
wasn't
you're
really
saying
framed
is that
that, it
there's
wasn't
no
really
need for it.
framed that way. I mean, it seemed like this went for hours, and
Yeah,
and
it
that
did go
was,
for
it wasn't
hours.
framed that way. It
But
was
I-
like framed as, would you consider a 3-story building in exchange for some public benefits to be?
And they were saying
Determine-
that's fine, but we don't know what the public benefit is. We understand the exception exists, but tell us what it would be, which is where you came up and said I could come up with 5 of them to start with, which immediately nobody at council said, name them for me. But they could have.
Right.
But how crazy that those would be kept. I'm sure they're great ideas, but that something we just said would become the public benefits without like real thought
Right.
and consideration
Oh, yeah.
about and a
What we
bigger
need,
discussion
what-
about what we
what
really
we
need. Just like
So-
throw out some ideas and then great, those will be them.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity in my mind. And the other thing I thought about on my way home is I'm happy. I signed a community benefits agreement on a project I'm working on in San Francisco, and I'm happy to bring that in and share it just as a learning
Yeah, that'd be a good
experience. And I mean, the beauty of it is that there's nothing hidden. I mean, it's a public document, and we're held accountable, and we all agree on what we're going to do in exchange for.
Well, it's a win-win.
Yeah, So,
That would be great.
Do you want to agendize anything for,
Well, I would
Future?
like to see if we could put agenda item to discuss optimum public benefits so that we can help city council if they
They probably
choose
would
to do the
appreciate that.
exception. We can advise them, here are some public benefits, and if we make it a public meeting.
And the public would
The public
come.
can come and say,
Brainstorm.
they can talk, and if it's a study session, we don't even have to take action, we can just brainstorm it through.
first one will be low-cost housing. I
Would
mean,
it
that'll
be-
come up in
would
every
it
one
be-
of them.
Would it be helpful to have, I don't want to put more on staff, but have them identify what public benefits this town has previously acknowledged as public benefits, or what some
We've
of our
actually
neighboring towns are doing?
Started pulling together a list of some of the public benefits that projects.
I
make in the
certainly would
downtown.
want that prior to having a meeting. That would be
Exactly.
Right.
That'd be
So-
part of the staff
Standards.
report.
That might be a good
Here's the staff
starting
That's part of this, that's the deal, yeah.
And what about other towns that do these sort of public-private?
A lot of other communities actually do the development agreement route where they don't get a public benefit that's part of or on the project line itself, but they will give the city either funds to construct something or do other improvements in town, or there's just a whole range of different things that can be negotiated. And
Right.
it becomes a negotiation then between the developer and the city to achieve what the developer would like to do to construct their project, and to help the city provide some kind of public facility or service. Or
How close are you to concluding that?
the list is just about done.
Well, why don't we put that on the next meeting, make that,
think-
I'd love to see
I'm going to
it.
hold off on the next agenda because
Yeah.
I want to bring back the CT zoning regulations for the El
Yes.
Camino Real, and I want you to have a really good
Okay.
focused discussion on that, because we need to move that forward, given that we have the moratorium that council has adopted, and we want to get that wrapped up before the
Yes, good
moratorium.
idea.
And these two items that were continued are not there to a date not certain. Do you have any idea whether they will be coming back?
I would expect it wouldn't be until maybe the second meeting in February.
Okay.
I think we could also invite Lacey to collate for us all the benefits that they've been giving this city in the past, that they've just been donating, like the Third Street Green or whatever other sponsorships. I know they do a lot. I'm sure they know what they've done, but those are things that maybe could be wrapped up, and we want these things to be continued. I don't know if that could be a public benefit.
Or-
A guarantee to continue some of these things that they, sponsorships and.
or maybe they can be invited to be part of it as a, presentation on, based on that meeting and further thought, here's some of the public benefits that they've been thinking about,
The more ideas, the better.
for sure.
Okay.
Is there a area for new,
That's,
are we in this new
we're in,
items?
we're in future
Potential.
agenda items.
Future agenda items, yeah.
So I would as we're sitting here today talking about kind of metrics and measuring, the effectiveness, I was thinking that I'm wondering if we could get some feedback on to the extent that they've been installed, those traffic calming measures that we took action on earlier last year.
Are these the flashing pedestrian?
No, it was like on Lout Street or whatever, they put in the speed bumps.
Okay.
And I think that was where the neighborhood actually came together to request it and approve it. And I mean, it would seem to be fairly easy to go back to them and figure out whether
It
it's
was
been
effective or not.
Yeah.
That was the one where half the street voted it and the other half
Half
didn't.
got speed bumps and half did not.
So we'll see.
Are there other ways to get data on whether it's effective that are more like fact-based? I wonder
Good speed survey?
if it's not expensive and time-consuming, but I feel like that, the anecdotal evidence is not as valuable to me as the.
Well, in this case, it might. I would respectfully disagree, because the reason that the process began is because the neighborhood said things are bad here. And so that was
Their
anecdotal.
perception has changed. that
Then,
would be
and Cedric did all the right studies to. and
Be
he
curious
did-
to see what they'd say
But
now.
if the survey says, so it's a year post-occupancy, so to speak,
Okay.
how do you feel about the effectiveness? Has it changed your opinion? That was the target of why you wanted to have this happen. And if people say, yeah, it's better now, it's still anecdotal, but the starting point was
Yeah.
anecdotal too.
Sure. Can we get both?
They could put those rubber tubes down.
Because, sometimes when you get the facts and someone tells you, actually, test scores have gone up, and you're like, I don't know if our school's doing better, and I am on the fence, but then you hear, test scores went up, that makes you feel better.
Yes.
So
We wait right
maybe
to see.
both
Confirms.
are valuable.
Okay, with that, and
All
adjourn.
right. Good meeting, guys.
While you're leaving, I'll make a pitch for the Planning Commission